In a world ravaged by secret societies, cults, and government corruption, a time where telling the truth has become a revolutionary act. The people cried out for answers, for justice. There were many who answered the call. Together, we are the Anti-Naughty. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Anti-Naughty podcast. I am your host, Eric Jones, and I would also like to welcome all of you to the Anti-Naughty. That's right, there are no secret handshakes, blood oaths, or initiation rituals. If you're here and you stand against secret societies, cults, and government corruption, you are already a part of the Anti-Naughty, because the Anti-Naughty is not an idea. It is an idea, not an organization. So thank you guys for coming to the first episode, this episode 0. I called this episode 0 because it's not really the normal format of what the show is going to be. My hope for this show is to turn it into an interview/conversation show where we'll bring on different experts who research cults and conspiracy, globalism, and we will interview them, have I don't really want to say interview, I want it to be a little more casual than that, but have conversations with different experts in the field. But for this episode, I thought that I would tell you guys my story, how I came to dedicate my life to fighting the Illuminati, and so let's get started. So I was raised as a Protestant. My parents were Southern Baptist, so I grew up in a Christian home. And I always had an interest in kind of specialty topics, I guess, like studying angels. I thought was pretty interesting, and I was doing that at a pretty young age. So I always had kind of an interest in the weird. But what really shook up my life was 9/11, and I was in 8th grade when that event happened, and I remember spending the whole day just watching TV, just watching the news. I was shocked by what had happened, and it really wasn't long after the event that we started seeing documentaries come out talking about how 9/11 was an inside job. We had things like Loose Change. I think there was like 4 or 5 different versions of that film. Number of other ones. And most of them were pretty bad, honestly. They didn't do a very good job of making their arguments. Some of the evidence that they used was just bad. And so they were kind of counterproductive, I feel like, on some level. And so I disregarded the 9/11 conspiracy theories for a long time, and it wasn't until later in my life that I would reopen that. But one of the things I'd like to do on this channel, we've talked a lot about stories used as propaganda already, and we'll continue to do that. But I also want to talk about stories that inspire me, stories that I think are worth watching or reading. And one of these stories had a big impact on my life, and that was a scene from Hotel Rwanda, and that's a film about the Rwandan genocide. And so when I was in high school, the best teacher I ever had, he showed us this film. And after we watched it, he stopped the film and he wanted to highlight a particular scene. I'm going to tell you that scene. I don't think this will ruin the movie for you if you haven't seen it. But that scene, Don Cheadle's character is trying to protect people during this genocide, and a group of reporters come in, and Don Cheadle wants to thank them for the work they're doing and for trying to tell the world what's going on in Rwanda. And so he thanks one of these cameramen played by Joaquin Phoenix. And Phoenix, he's super depressed, and he says, we haven't really done much because people will look, eating their dinners, will see this report on TV, they'll look up and they'll say, that's terrible. And then they'll go back to eating their dinners. And my teacher, he recited the lines from the scene, and he did it with such passion on his face. I could really see he wanted to reach us in that moment. He wanted us to care about these issues, these horrible issues that are going on in the world. And that moment, it's one of the most important moments in my life, I would say. It really did inspire me, and I never wanted to be someone who just went back to eating my dinner when I saw something horrible going on. But I did. So eventually, but not yet. So eventually I got back when I was in college. I started thinking about 9/11 again, and I eventually started researching that again myself. And I did conclude that 9/11 was an inside job, that we had been lied to about the event in so many ways. And then I saw all sorts of people talking about the existence of the Illuminati, this widespread manipulation of society. And so I got into researching that as well. And it seemed to me clear that there is something like the Illuminati. And I didn't really understand it yet, but it seemed like this was a real issue to me. And so I went, all the way down the hole, the hole and all the, subdivisions of the holes. I got super into posting on conspiracy forums. And I would say I bought into a lot of bullshit. I was pretty young. I was like 18, 19 when I was especially hardcore diving into this stuff. And I didn't know how to properly research and analyze information. But I was convinced that there were things to be concerned about. And so I started pretty quickly posting about this, trying to expose it to people. And, looking back on that now, I think a lot about how I was doing a poor job presenting the information I was presenting. Now, some of it I was right about. I had done some good research, but I didn't know how to present it. And I was often super arrogant and foolish in the way I presented it. And so it really does bother me when I see people talking about the Freemasons and the Illuminati in a uneducated and not tactful manner, because it can be very counterproductive when you're talking about these things and you do it badly. People will just be like, oh, that guy's crazy. I'm not even going to consider what he has to say. But eventually, so I got into researching, hardcore. I was doing this all the time, and I decided the Illuminati was a real thing, and that I was going to dedicate my life to fighting them, because, I didn't want to be someone who saw a great evil and ignored it. And so I got my parents. I sat them down. I was like, I have something serious to talk to you guys about. And I told them that, history has been manipulated by these secret societies, and evil men, and that I was going to dedicate my life to standing against them. And I have no idea, what was going through my parents' head at that time. They certainly didn't buy into all the stuff I did then or even now. Although now, my mom recently said to me, when you first brought all this up, I didn't know what to think about it, but now I'm starting to see maybe there's something to it. So that happened. I also eventually, through my research, I was led to Christianity. I had kind of rejected the Christianity after I had gotten into college, but studying all this stuff did lead me back to it. Things like the historical nature of the global flood. There are accounts of the flood all over the world from different people groups that shouldn't have such similar stories. Seeing how the occult ties into history, especially compared to how the Bible talks about how the occult ties into history and the supernatural. This all helped lead me back towards Christianity. Seeing, for example, that it says in Revelations that the kings of the earth will pledge their power to the beast. And we might not be quite there yet, but we're certainly going in that direction, where at this point we have so many of our world leaders that are actual Satanists, pedophiles, like Nazi scum. So seeing that, helped me see the truth of Christianity. And that the fact that they're constantly also trying to convert people towards certain belief systems. That was a huge moment for me when I realized that the Masons were actively working to convert us. And that made me realize that this is truly a spiritual battle that we're in. I also, towards the end of this part of my life, I started to realize just how many of the guys who were talking about cults and conspiracy, how many of these guys were charlatans, just taking advantage of people, spreading misinformation, lies, making up stories. And some of this, I think, are just people trying to profit off of people looking for answers in the same way that a cult leader would. They take advantage of people who are just seeking truth. But there are also people that are perhaps, intelligence operatives that are working to muddy the waters for those trying to seek answers. And so I realized just how many of the people in this field are lying scum. And that was quite shocking for me, because I had looked up to many of these people, earlier on in my research. Chris White's work was very influential on me, because he did so many great debunkumentaries on guys like David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tessarian. He did one on ancient aliens. He's got a lot of great work. And I would highly recommend his debunkumentaries if you've never seen them. And so eventually, though, I got to a point in my life where I became really depressed. I had, just because of things that went on in my personal life. And I was just in a very poor state. And I also didn't really know how to make a career out of fighting the Illuminati. And so I kind of reverted on some level back from where I had gotten in terms of like my wokeness. And so I started watching guys. I was paying less attention to what's really going on. I started listening to guys like the IDW, intellectual dark web type people, Ben Shapiro, Crowder, kind of these level of guys. And I was just slacking on what I really cared about. And I started considering, like, how can I make a career otherwise, not pursuing, secret societies. And I thought about comics and storytelling, because, you can speak about these sorts of things through storytelling, and that can have a big impact on people as well. But it wasn't what I meant to do. I might pursue comics at some point as a side thing. Still, there are stories I would like to tell, but what I'm meant to do is talk about conspiracy, talk about secret societies. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is a parable that Jesus gives, where he talks about a wealthy man who gave money to each of his servants when he left, and he said, use this currency, turn it into something more, go trade it, invest it, turn it into something greater when I get back, and we'll see how you do. And so he comes back, and his first servant has made a great profit with the money he had given him. The second servant also did a really good job, but the third servant says he didn't do anything with it. He put it in a handkerchief and he held it safe. And he failed his master because he didn't do anything with what he had been given. And it's a story that I deeply relate to, because I felt like for a long time I was wasting what I had been given. I have a great understanding of these topics, and I wasn't doing anything with it. It's like I buried the coin instead of investing it. I was talking to a friend about this recently, and he totally got what I was saying, and he said it in a way that I thought was really perfect. It's like I feel ashamed for not having started this channel and started doing this earlier. And it's like I had a sword in the closet and there's a battle on outside, and I was just sitting here. But this is what I'm meant to do. And so I eventually, started thinking about how am I going to pursue this stuff. And I started thinking about secret societies as cults. And what I mean by that was I would distinguish a religion and a cult in this way. A cult manipulates its own members purposefully. It lies to them and misleads them to use them as pawns. Whereas a religion is more upfront about its beliefs and what it wants from you. A cult is trying to manipulate you. And I say that this definitely exists in organizations like Masonry. And so I started to think about secret societies as cults. And I came across an organization called the International Cultic Studies Association, I believe is what it stands for, ICSA. And I went to one of their conferences, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it was great to start to interact with some professionals in a related field to what I want to do. And so, that happened. And then I was, continuing to think about how can I make a career out of fighting the Illuminati. And I was watching the IDW type people still, like Crowder and Shapiro, this level of analysis. And when the Epstein case came out more publicly a while back, I saw it and I knew what it was, and I was so angry that no one was even talking about it. Like, I didn't hear any of these people mention it a single time. And now everybody's talking about it. Now everybody's interested after he's been offed, but nobody seemed to give a damn at the time. And I was so frustrated that they wouldn't cover it. And I had been thinking about, what I want to do. And so the first video I made actually was the Epstein video I have on the channel. And I was going to use that as a multi-part series where I talked about the Illuminati and child sex trafficking and MK Ultra and try to show how all these things connect. But then I just got working on my Illuminati video, and that turned into a huge project. And I wanted to use that first series as basically my application for a master's program. There was a master's program associated with some of the people at ICSA that I was interested in, and I was basically told I could go before I even applied by the guy who runs it. But I wanted to be sure that they would be down with what I'm doing, talking about secret societies, and so I created that. And as I was working on it and it got bigger and bigger, I came across Jay Dyer's work that really impressed me, and I was really glad to know that there were people out there doing such a great level of analysis, because I had kind of pulled back from the entire conspiracy community. I had been paying less attention to all this stuff for a good while, and it's just been great to jump back into it and start to network with some people who are really serious about this stuff. And so that's basically taken us to where we are at today. And now I am fully dedicated to doing this. This is all I've ever wanted to do. I'm so happy doing it. And it's been really great so far. I'm really enjoying where we're going. And so for this podcast, I also would like to talk with people about what can we actually do to stand against the Illuminati and the globalists. How can we actually, counter these people? There's people who talk about this stuff, but is there anything we can actually do other than just talk about it? And I don't know. I'd love to see the end of Freemasonry. I'd like to see it outlawed. Maybe that's not the most realistic thing, but the fact is, the biggest counter to Masonry we've ever seen was the anti-masonic party in America. And so, somewhere in there I kind of skipped over it, but I went and got my degree in history, and I wrote about the anti-masonic party and the Morgan affair, because it's the best time in history to point to, hey, the Masons are a clear problem, and many people realized that, and they were effective in fighting them, and many Masons left the order. It did weaken Masonry for a short time, but then people just forgot about it. It's crazy. That whole movement started with the death of just a single individual. Now we have events like 9/11, where, half the country believes that, we've got insiders in the government who murdered so many civilians, and we still can't get organized to stand against these people. So I don't really know what the answers are, but I'd like to discuss, realistic ways to stand against the secret societies and what they're doing to our world. So hopefully this show will be a weekly show. I'm not sure how difficult it's going to be to gather guests to come on, especially since I'm in the early phases of, networking with people. But I think, before long it'll be easy to start doing this weekly. It might be every other week or so early on here. But we've got this Anti-Naughty podcast. I'm also working on a series where we're going to start, I'm going to call it the Masonic Mastery series, where we start to go through books on Freemasonry, both written by Masons and anti-Masons, and go through important books. I've got another show I'm working on with a good friend of mine, and that'll be probably a more casual show where we just sit and talk about things. So I've got a lot in the works, and I really do want to make this my full-time job as quickly as possible, because this is what I'm good at. I think I'm really good at it. And I should have started this a long time ago, but I guess I got to make up for lost time and just work my ass off, and I plan to do that. So Uh, I'd also like to have some sort of discussion at the end of each of these podcasts. So some questions would be great. If you want to ask me any questions, people who are here for the live stream right now, just hit at Picking Bones with some of your questions. We can do a few questions maybe before signing off. Yeah, let's see if we get any questions here, and we'll wrap up for the night. Something I'll also say is if I'm kind of testing the technical aspect of this. This is my first time using OBS and YouTube, so there might be a bit of a delay. I don't know exactly how the sound is, but I want to test this out here before we get into actually interviewing people. So I hope that this sounds decent. One child, Charles Kevin Liptak, asks, do I think that we go to space? I don't think we've been to the moon. I think we can do like low altitude orbit, but I don't think we can go past the Van Allen belts. We've got NASA scientists on video saying just that they're trying to figure out how to go past low altitude. Still, this is like current day NASA scientists talking about how we can't do something that we did like 50 years ago. So that's pretty insane. So no, I don't think that we are actually going into space. Have I heard of the Alta Vendita, the document of the Freemasons to infiltrate the Catholic Church? I have heard of it. There's a book on the topic that I have not gotten to read yet. I haven't dug too much into that. There's a lot of material, though, out on Freemasons and the Catholic Church. If you look at throughout the history of Catholicism, Freemasonry has been outlawed by the church the majority of the time. There are plenty of statements of different popes and different priests speaking out against the evils of Masonry and saying, what you said, that their goal is to infiltrate the church. If you get, I can pick up this book here. 1 second. Something I didn't talk about in my first talk on the Illuminati and the history of secret societies is in this Born in Blood book. He actually does reference one of these documents. Pope Leo the 13th gave a statement on the Masonic sect, and he talks all about it. He talks about how they work to infiltrate all aspects of our society, not just the church, but also, the educational system and all aspects of our secret society. And you can find Masons, and cult members talking about doing that themselves also. So you can find both sides talking about this. Yeah, we don't have a ton of questions, so I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off, guys. But this has hopefully been a great first show for you. I really enjoyed this, and hopefully we can do this every week, maybe every other week for now. But thanks a lot, guys, and have a great day.